Welcome everybody online and in the room here. We're trying to figure out who we want to show to the audience online. Here's our students, trainees, and here's our faculty and custom-based estuaries program staff and more faculty, which is so great to see here. I think I'll start by introducing myself quickly. I'm Dorina Murgulet. I am PI and director of the NRT Stages, which is National Science Foundation Research Traineeship, stakeholder guided environmental science research for graduate students, obviously. And it is about interdisciplinarity and working with community partners to co-develop research questions. I will ask the audience to introduce themselves, and we're going to start with our guests today. So,
Hi, thank you all for the opportunity to come and to be part of this process and share a little more about what we do. My name is Kirsten Stanzel. I'm the executive director of the program. I guess our staff here.
I'm Mary Kramer. I'm a project manager.
Former A&M.
Yes.
so you knew your way, I can tell.
Jay Herring, serve the director of land conservation for the Estuary program.
Catherine Tunnell, I'm a project manager for the Estuary program. I'm Lee Perry. I'm project manager with the Estuary program.
David, you said I was director of the bird program.
Now we're moving to our faculty guests in the back there.
Large for the American professor of math and statistics.
Philip Tiso, Conrad Lutra, chair for political artificial
And part of this program. We're going to start from back in. Louder. Louder.
I'm Dustin, PhD, social marine system sciences.
I'm Allison, PhD, Coastal Marine System Science.
Okay.
I'm Patrick Larkin. I'm associate professor in physical and environmental sciences.
And I'm Janet Donaldson. I'm the associate vice president for research and also professor in microbiology.
And our guests online, if you would like to introduce yourselves, Hossein, I'll start with you. I'll just go from top down.
Hussein Abdullah, Associate Professor of Chemistry.
Okay, Aaron.
Aaron Baxter, Project Manager with the Estuary program.
Adrian. You're muted.
Sorry, I lost my mouse there. Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Hilmy. I'm a project manager for the Estuary program as well.
Shelby or yeah, Shelby.
Hello, my name is Shelby Bissett, and I am a project leader with the Coastal Bird Program within the Estuary program.
And Patrick?
Patrick Nye, Ingleside on the Bay Coastal Watch Association.
Great. B, I think you're the last one.
Hi, I'm B. I'm the peer mentor for the Stages program and also a PhD in the MARB program. Yes, marine biology.
Biology program. Yes, so B was part of our traineeship group last year, and she's transitioned with this new group as a peer mentor. So I'm just going to allow you to talk about the program, and we're going to have questions at the end.
Yeah, and feel free. I mean, people can ask questions as we go along too. And I'm going to call on some of my staff, especially my program leaders, there's no reason for me to talk about your program. So when we get to those slides, I may turn to some of them as well.
See, can everybody hear well online from the audience too, as well as us closer? I'm pretty sure you hear us here, but do you hear the audience in the room?
Adrian has a thumbs up.
Okay.
So
all right.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I'm going to try to I'll do kind of a broad overview of the organization and the areas where we focus. And I guess the short and sweet message is we do a lot and kind of anything related to environmental conservation work in the Coastal Bend region we're involved with. We have some programs that even go beyond the boundaries of the Coastal Bend here. And so we'll try to just touch on those briefly. And then we were asked to kind of come up with some questions at the end, or I call them areas of interest, where maybe there was an opportunity to collaborate together through this program. And so I'll try to, I won't speed through it, but I'll try to get through this kind of quickly so y'all get the background, but then hopefully we can have some discussion around these questions and focus our time there a little bit more. So start off with, just so people understand, you know, obviously we're located down here in the Coastal Bend region. We are one of 28 national estuary programs throughout the country. So this is a program that was established by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. It was actually part of the Clean Water Act. And so it's a congressionally designated program, which is a great thing because that means we get some funding annually from EPA. We have diversified our sources, so we get funding from a lot of other different organizations as well. But it's not what people think of as kind of a typical EPA program. People often associate it with, you know, regulations and top down, essentially kind of authoritarian. You must follow these rules. We call it more of their bottom up approach. It's part of their partnerships program. And really it's the programs are established to try to work with the local stakeholders in the area where the programs are to establish solutions to priority issues. So you can see there's 28 programs throughout the country. We have 2 here in Texas. There's one up in the Galveston Bay Estuary, and then of course ours down here. And the NEP program, or National Estuary Program, is unique in that the programs have a lot of different ways that they can be set up. We are set up as a 501c3 nonprofit, where our sister organization up in Galveston Bay is actually embedded within the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, so within a state agency. So there's different models throughout the country. There's some that are even at universities as well. There's one in Louisiana that's structured at a university. So they have lots of different models and approaches for working. When the program was being established almost 25 years ago, when the people who had been involved in kind of the process of building out the program felt like the nonprofit approach would allow us the most flexibility and be able to meet the needs of our area more than being embedded in TCQ, or there was even discussions about being part of the port, or, you know, where would that be the best fit. So eventually they ended up on nonprofit, and from our standpoint, I think most of our staff would agree that that was a really good approach and has allowed us to kind of build and structure the program the way we needed to. So to get to be an NEP, you have to have kind of a couple things established very early on. One, you have to set a program area. So this is where our kind of our focus, where we started, the 12 counties of the Coastal Bend that you see here. Obviously, we do most of our work kind of in the 6 coastal counties, but we do some programs that reach into the watershed as well. Obviously, trying to recognize that, you know, whatever happens in the watershed is eventually going to impact the bay. We do spread beyond this boundary a little bit with funding outside of that EPA money. We have a bird program staff person that's full-time down in the valley working on coastal bird issues down there. And we do have some projects kind of north of here into the San Antonio Bay area as well. So, you know, we say we have a program area, but we kind of lead past that a little bit whenever the need arises. And there's not another organization there to kind of fill a need. The other thing that you have to do when you're setting up your program is you have to develop something called a Coastal Comprehensive Management Plan, or a CCMP. We refer to ours, since that's a long acronym, we call ours the Coastal Bend Base Plan. This is basically a plan that's developed through a stakeholder process. It was done when the program was initially established in 1999. And through a whole variety of stakeholder meetings to discuss the priority issues that were affecting our region here. And then the idea was to come up with specific actions that could be done to try to address those issues. And so those essentially get incorporated into the plan, and that sets the framework for what we as an organization focus on. It's obviously not all done by us. We do all this through partnering with other organizations, the university, local governments, all kinds of different partners that can help meet the needs. So we originally developed the plan back in 1998. It says 1998 on there. It was really approved in 1999 was when it went into effect, and then we really started implementing it. And then we redid the plan a few years ago. And so there was a lot of the core things were similar still. A lot of the issues were unfortunately still there. Maybe there had been some improvement, but there was some things that had changed within our organization. Some programs that had developed, like our coastal bird program, our land program, our education program, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that kind of changed how the plan was structured. And we also, of course, there wasn't, back in the late 90s, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of recognition of climate change. So it wasn't a specific part of the plan before, whereas it is now in the new plan. So there's a lot of stuff in the plan, and I guess I should put a link or send it out. Maybe if there's an opportunity to send some follow-up materials out to the group. It's all available online. It's a long plan, but it's got a lot of really good. It really gets down into the details of what we try to focus on as an organization. But it boils down to so we have 10 different categories in the plan, and those result in 15 different action plans. So the action plans are organized into these 15 different categories, and so it's everything from like I mentioned, environmental education is part of that. Now we have a chapter around coastal birds because we have quite a few staff that focus on that issue. We have a human uses section, so that's a lot of our public access nature tourism activities. Of course, some of the core elements are around habitat and living resources, water and sediment quality, freshwater resources. All those things are still in there. I mean, also notice there is a maritime commerce and dredging section, which sometimes people are like, why is that in a conservation organization's plan? But we have several goals in there outlined around dredging and how to beneficially use dredge material. And that's one of our areas that Lee suggested maybe we focus on as a project here. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, as well as maritime safety. So obviously oil spill prevention and things like that. So there is a strong nexus there. Obviously, our bays are very much our navigable waters that are used for industry all the time. And so we felt like it was important to include that as part of the plan. So just a few examples. I'm not going to touch on every single section of the plan. I was going to highlight some of the specific ones. So habitat and wildlife, obviously there's tons of different actions in there. I tried to kind of boil them down into 4 different sections. So the first one being, of course, kind of habitat restoration, which that's a very broad category. And for us, that encompasses a lot of different types of restoration. Here, this is a picture of a rookery island out in the middle of Nueces Bay. So this island had essentially eroded down to about that little section right there that you see that's vegetated. And so we came in and we armored the shoreline there with rock and then added material back in to build that island back out. So we've been undertaking a lot of this type of restoration over the last few years, recognizing that our birds are really lacking a lot of suitable nesting habitat. And David can maybe touch on some of that later and when he describes his program. But we also do traditional shoreline restoration projects, trying to protect shorelines and then restore marsh along those areas. We just completed a breakwater project, which I have a picture of later in the slide, out of the Nueces Delta area. So lots of different types of habitat restoration. We also do hydrologic restoration on some of our own properties and other partner properties as well. Habitat and wildlife also includes invasive species control. We focused a lot on something called Brazilian pepper tree, which some of you may have heard about. It's a problem species in this area. There's kind of a larger stakeholder group that's focusing a lot on that. There's lots of other fun invasive species out there that need management as well. We do develop sometimes species-specific management plans to try to address issues that have arisen. And then, of course, algal blooms, harmful algal blooms in particular, which you're all probably familiar with. So water quality and freshwater inflows, again, lots of specific actions, trying to kind of narrow it down to kind of broad categories. So we do often focus a lot on water quality planning. So this is like watershed protection plans, TMDLs, which some of you may have heard about. This is when water body gets impaired and we have to develop a plan to try to address that issue. So we're typically involved a lot in that process. We do focus a lot on non-point source pollution as well. So runoff and pollutants that are coming from the landscape, from the watershed. Stormwater runoff is obviously a focus here in Corpus Christi in particular, but also other more urban areas. Bay debris, plastics, things like that have become a bigger issue. And I think they've been an issue for a while, but maybe just more awareness around them in the last 10 to 15 years. And then, of course, just supporting ongoing monitor efforts related to water quality. So I talked about some of those changes that happened in the program over the last 25 years. And one of those was the development of a land conservation program. So I'm going to flip it over to Jake, if he doesn't mind, and just kind of give a brief intro about what you do.
mechanical method to manage the landscape. So with that, then I'll just go off of Kirsten's bullets there. Anyways, so restoration. So looking at, okay, when we purchased this property, it was this type of habitat. We wanted it to be a certain type of habitat. And so how do we go about getting, from point A to point B? And like, what are the steps along the way? So kind of coming up with like a restoration plan. So that's everything from, your different management techniques for that specific piece of property, looking at, what plants should be growing on that landscape, and then what is growing in the landscape. So for instance, in this area specifically, the Nueces Delta, there are certain portions of it that, the previous owners, they had, taken, complete removal of all the native vegetation and planted introduced grasses. And so those introduced grasses are more palatable for, cattle raising, like beef cattle operation, which is not necessarily the goal of what we had for that property. And so trying to, what steps do we have to take to get it back towards a more native landscape? And then access control. Yeah, there are certain parts of the world that they're just better if people aren't driving all over them or anything like that. And so being able to, identify those sensitive habitat areas and, just kind of put some cautions in place or put some man-made things in place to help, keep people out of them and educate folks that they respect that they just kind of go in by foot, be it driving their truck. But yeah, so in one thing I think that we look at, with land conservation plans is, being able to link properties together to create, like habitat corridors. So for instance, we kind of started doing that up in Refugio County along the Mission River. So we've been working with, the Estuary program as a property owner, and then the people that do have, ties, they are tied to those properties, whether they've been in their family for a long time or just recently, but they want to see those properties conserved. So working with those landowners to be able to help them meet their goals. So that's, typically that would be the purchase or donation of a conservation easement. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with conservation easement, but it's just it's a legal binding document that kind of sets out what you can and cannot do on the property.
Yeah, you're essentially kind of paying someone for their development rights to that property, so they can no longer.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody?
Well, question now, or
Yeah.
you're thinking to?
And Jake has a couple ideas
You're
later
making
for
notes.
discussion
Yeah,
too. Yeah,
taking
around
notes
some of
if
those
they're
things.
gonna ask
Perfect.
questions.
I see a lot of, yeah. Okay, perfect. I'm not sure who's next. Let's see. Or maybe, I don't know if I'm linked anymore now. I may have to. Okay, here we go. I think we have to click back on. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we have anyone from our education program out today. They're kind of preparing. They're in a busy time of year right now. They hosting lots of school trips. So once we realized that we had this opportunity to acquire property, and what are we up to? 12. I was thinking close to 12,000 acres in the Nueces Delta. 11. Okay, sorry, overshooting it. 11,000 acres in the Nueces Delta area. We realized we had an opportunity to bring people out to that site to and to essentially host our education program out there. And so we do have a little bit of infrastructure out there, some bathrooms and classrooms and things like that. And the idea is just to get kids outside, doing a lot of hands-on investigative learning. We do also do teacher workshops where we're training teachers essentially how to take the outdoors into their classroom. And then we do, over the last few years, we've added more community programs. These are just open to the general public. Stargazing parties, picnics on Saturdays, and story times for early learning. So, this program sees thousands of people every year. We do all of this free of charge to everyone. So we try to grant fund all of this and make it accessible to everybody. Bird program. Can you summarize it all?
So the bird program kind of developed out of from that original base plan and the natural resource assessments that went into that. that highlighted a severe decline in colonial nesting water birds. These are birds that you know whether you think you know them or not. For all those ones that are flying around out there, spoonbills, and herons, egrets, pelicans, and gulls. And a lot of those birds have been declining over the last 40 or 50 years. They nest on these small islands out here in the bay, not on Padre Island, and not on Ward Island, but on these small islands that are in the mesas. A lot of those were dredged material islands. At the time, there was not really a whole lot being done about it. It was just sort of watching the decline. So the program grew initially as a means of putting a couple people out there and doing something about it. What was the problem? There was invasive species on islands. There were predator issues. There was erosion was taking islands away, things like that. So it was like, all right, put on your boots, get out there and do something. So that's sort of where the bird program initially started. And I first started working there with a guy who had been tracking these declines for 40 or 50 years. And he would always emphasize to me that my job at the end of the day was to make birds. So the program's grown a lot since then. The bird program's grown a lot, but I always kind of tried to make sure that I keep that sort of in the back of my mind. There's a lot of things that you can do to make birds, and even education and outreach can make birds essentially. So we've since grown, and we've done a lot of different research. We started doing a lot of research on highly migratory species. So shorebirds that nest way up in the Arctic and might depend on this area for the full winter, for which may be 8 or 9 months for them. Some of them are coming all the way from the Arctic, stopping right around here, and they need to fuel up for another migration. It's going to take them all the way from here to South America. So they have like really, really high energetic requirements. So what we can do to protect habitat, better understand how this area fits into these really hemispheric linkages, is we have a responsibility in the coastal bend area to be good stewards of this critical link. There's only a few really, really big critical links in the life cycle of a lot of these species, and this is one of them. This, prairie potholes, the Arctic breeding grounds in South America. So we recently started focusing a lot more energy on trying to understand how we make a better landscape. It's a big area. A lot of different property owners, a lot of different economic pressures, and how do we make it so that these birds have what they need to make it on to the next link in their life history.
Okay. Any questions for them? And again, he has some kind of a research area of interest that we'll share later. Okay. And then kind of the last one I was going to highlight is just, again, not as much relevant maybe for this group. I don't know, maybe y'all have an idea that I haven't thought of, but the public access and nature tourism, as we call it, kind of human uses. So this is typically, like I said, our properties are not necessarily open to the public. We do have public programs, but we don't own parks. But so we're typically doing this with other partners that do have areas that are open to the public all of the time. And so this, again, includes all kinds of different things. Jake mentioned access control already. We partner a lot to try to keep people out of sensitive habitats. Many of you have been out to Pathway Flats, all those bollards that are out there. We just recently reinstalled a bunch of those, trying to keep people and their vehicles out of those sensitive areas. We work a lot on, there's always an interest in getting more boat ramps and more accessibility to the bay, trails and boardwalks. We're about to start a big project at the Honsuter part that Catherine's overseeing, installing new trail, concrete trails out there. Always a lot of need for educational signs to highlight important features, also just tell people why it's important to stay out of these habitats, all those things. There's always opportunities for everything that we do to do education and outreach. So I thought I'd highlight just a couple of things. Like I always talk about like 4 key factors that kind of drive how we work as an organization. And I think they are essentially why it would make us a good fit for this project, and why we were asked to be part of this project. So one is that, the things we do, again, we try to make sure it needs to be stakeholder driven. And so, that started 25 years ago with the development of the base plan. That was a stakeholder driven process. But it doesn't stop like with the development of the plan. We continue to work with partners to implement that plan over the years and adapt and change as we need to the priority issues. I think the bird program is a perfect example. I think when the plan was initially established, didn't maybe highlight as much of what we realized about the declines until, really the coastal bird program started working and realized what a need there was there. So we do this through something called implementation teams. So it's kind of, again, that bottom-up approach. We have a number of different teams that meet annually. Many of your faculty come to those meetings and share ideas about issues, and then also the ideas to develop projects, again, actions that we can implement to start addressing those issues. And sometimes the estuary program will fund those projects. Other times we'll work with other partners to bring the right funds to the project. But the idea is to try to, again, make sure that the stakeholder teams are driving the process, and it goes through a number of levels of approval before it ultimately goes to our board of directors for their input. The second one is that good science leads to better management. So I think obviously that's the key of this project, right? And this is an example of a tag placed on a skimmer, one of the birds that David has focused a lot of effort on, but trying to make sure that the science is driving the decisions that we're making is always been a core kind of component of our program. Obviously some of the stuff we do, even the small things we do, we always need to try to leverage the resources that we have available to us, whether that's funding or partnerships, whatever it is. This is an example of a breakwater I was mentioning that we just installed out in front of the Nueces Delta. This area has been eroding. What was their most recent erosion rate? It was like 14 feet per year. So think about losing 14 feet of marsh every year, so we just recently installed this. We're actually getting ready to partner with the Corps of Engineers to put some dredge material out here as well and build that habitat back out as much as possible. And so again, these projects, some of these are huge projects that require lots of different partners and leveraging of resources. And so we can't do it alone. And then fourth, community engagement is obviously key to success. And so this is a photo from out at our property of one of our environmental education programs hosting a day to come out and people just to get their hands and see the resource. And so obviously that's just anything that we do, if it's going to be successful, we have to engage the community, not just the people who are helping us implement the projects, but the broader coastal community as well. And then another thing, for us, diverse partnerships are important. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I did just want to highlight it. So, we work a lot with the local governments here in town. Many of them sit on our board of directors. We also work with the Port of Corpus Christi. We work with the universities. We work with other foundations, other NGOs. And it's just, this is an example. This is just from this last year of the different partners that, this is just of the funding entities that we utilized our current fiscal year that we're in right now. And so obviously a huge array of different types of partners with different interests and different things that they want to focus on. But I think that's been one of the keys to our success, is that ability to work with a broad suite of partners to implement as many projects as possible. And so that's it for the intro part. Do you want to go straight into the questions? Or I guess, does anyone have questions about the program in general, for specific folks about what they do? Or
yeah, we can do that. So, I can't.
Anyone online?
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
So in terms of project ideas that you guys might have for us, are there any specifics of those?
That's what
Yes.
we were
I
asking.
have some slides next, and so I'm happy to we can delve right into that.
We're just wondering, there are questions about the content so far, or we can move.
Just kind of how we got, I guess, as an organization, or the history, or anything like that.
So it's okay.
We
Any
can all
questions?
Go read the base plan later.
Like, I do have this
So why-
curiosity about the erosion. It's crazy high. What's causing it?
It's just ongoing wind and wave erosion.
Is
It's
it?
just a big bay with lots of vetch, and that it's just that delta front there. Has just taken lack of sediment supply, obviously, with the Nueces River being the way it is, and it doesn't actually go into the delta anymore, right? So it's bypassed the delta essentially and feeds directly into the bay. There's been a big lack of sediment supply to build the marsh back up too. So
And is it the sea, maybe the sea level going up?
well, that
through
yeah,
this-
Yep.
And subsidence of the land. Looks like a perfect storm.
So you do have
measurements of subsidence, or you have anybody looking at them?
We have some SETs out there, sediment elevation tables out there. Ken Dutton's group installed those a few years ago, and we've been kind of supporting the ongoing monitoring of those. There's three out there maybe. They've only been in for about 5 years, maybe. And they did, I think, marker horizons to monitor accretion as well at those sites. And so they're part of the Mission Marine System Bureau actually monitors them as part of their broader SET network that they have. And I don't know if Philippe knows about, is there any better subsidence information out there?
There's INSTAR results around, but INSTAR is challenging rights near the water and the marshes, so I don't think there are results on that.
Okay. So yeah, so there's a little bit of data, but not a extensive data set yet. Oh, there's a hand.
Oh, okay. Patrick, yes, please. Sorry, and you can introduce yourself because I think I skipped you.
No, you got me a little bit. I'm Patrick Nye, Ingleside on the Bay Coastal Watch. Thank you. I missed Dr. Tussaud's comments there, but I wanted to ask, do future sea level rise projections influence how you approach a project?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So those get incorporated into, especially when you're talking about a shoreline erosion project and into all the modeling. We typically work with engineers on that. And so we're not doing the modeling ourselves, but that is definitely incorporated into any, scenario when you're looking at installing a breakwater, the structures that I showed around the bird islands and things like that. So yes, we definitely factor in sea level rise to those.
And one more question. Ingleside on the Bay is on Live Oak Peninsula. It's basically the same deposition that Flower Bluff has. It's a sandy, ancient Padre Island, if you will. There's a lot of percolating water that comes out of the base of that formation along the Live Oak Peninsula. And is that included in anywhere in the freshwater source for Corpus Christi Bay?
That's a question outside of my expertise. The person who would know the most would be Dorina.
I wasn't supposed to answer questions today, but I'm joking. Patrick, you're referring to groundwater movement under the bay and what may make it a submarine groundwater discharge?
Actually, it comes out of the base of the dune of McGloin's Bluff. And if you look at Google Maps between Enbridge's Pier and actually through Ingleside, you'll see a greening along the base of that. There's actually a freshwater marsh with cattails and other vegetation that is, I think, representative of some of the inflow. But I'm just wondering how that is being looked at, along the entire peninsula. It goes all the way to Rockport, of course, and then Flower Bluff. How much of resource of fresh water does that add to Corpus Christi Bay is the question.
So no, not specifically. Unless it makes it out into the bay, we haven't evaluated that.
Yeah, I mean, I would, that's probably I would have to look at the regional water planning, documents to see how much they consider that. But I would guess, one, we probably don't have enough information to actually quantify that. Like you're saying, there's not much known about it. So I know Dorina's had some studies to try to quantify that better. So it does get into those planning efforts. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, there's just they don't have enough info to actually make it into the planning process. So there has to be some assumptions made about quantities and where that's coming from and things like that. So it's definitely an area of research need. Probably.
That too, and the error associated with the measurements are generally what doesn't lead into those, doesn't get incorporated into the plans because the error is very large and it's a question of how much and the temporal resolution of that is also a big question. But we're talking about wetlands, and that's something that I would love to get into. Probably we can talk about it more. I would love to look into what you mentioned, Patrick, for sure.
Does any other staff know more about that for the meeting?
Thank you for that.
Rick, okay.
Yeah. We had an instrument, we had a look at something like flower bluff. It was something he used to measure groundwater.
Well, there are many ways to measure, but if we're talking about what gets into the surface water, we have to use tracers in our environment here because it's unconsolidated sediment. It's just seeping through, and the way we measure it is if we measure like continuously tracers, like radon is what I'm using, or radium, or I don't know, maybe oxygen hydrogen isotopes would be helpful. But you can always put monitoring wells, and that's what we have up the coast, Matagorda up to Galveston Bay on the Barrier Island, where we're looking at the fluctuation of the water table and calculate, because they're gradients practically. So, but that'll be something that I'm curious about. You really made me curious, so I'll make sure to follow up with you.
Okay.
Thank you, Patrick. Did you have more, or we can move on?
No, that's great. Thank you. I'd love to visit with you about that. We have some pretty good, neat little areas that really show water percolating out of the base of that sand area.
Yeah, I don't doubt. Nice. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any more questions, or we're moving into the? Okay.
So I asked, kind of queried my staff just to try to see if people had questions that they wanted to bring forward, and some of these are mine, but the first one's long because I just copied David's text, but he can summarize this for you and try to talk some about what he's already touched on, but do you want to put you on the spot first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit. So we're getting, like, I guess the think about shorebird migration, the hemispheric shorebird migration, a lot of distance, a lot of energy goes into all these birds making this migration. Millions of birds fueling up in the Arctic. When you think about it like as just a chain, the big chain links are this is one of the big chain links around here, and there's some concern that it may be broken a little bit. So what we're in an area where it's the terminus of a lot of flyways for ducks and geese, things like that. They come down to here in the winter, and then they leave. Most of those birds are already gone. They usually don't arrive until October, November, and then they leave usually by around now. But the shorebirds are under different constraints because they can't get to the Arctic. They can't leave for the Arctic right now. The Arctic's still locked in ice. So they actually have a much later migration in the spring, and they have a much earlier migration. They leave the Arctic in July, late July. So the timing of when they need habitat here is sort of outside the traditional waterfowl season. So a lot of landowners, a lot of land is being managed for waterfowl. So they'll turn the water on at the end of September. So the ducks use it, and then they'll pull the boards. These are managed wetland units. You pull the boards and drain them. Not all of them do this, but a lot of them do this. So there's a lot of wetland acreage available in the midwinter that's not available prior to that, after that. And that's when the shorebirds really need it. But of course, who cares about shorebirds? Who's paying for shorebird conservation? These people have got other things to do with their land at different times of the year. And then they put water on it, and they hunt waterfowl, and they get revenue off of it that way. So there's been some bioenergetic modeling that shows that illustrates that there's probably not enough of this shallow water habitat in the fall. But it's based on essentially a one-time satellite pass of imagery, and that just quantifies whether this pixel is classified as sheet water that's good for shorebirds or not. It's yes or no. And the reality is there's a lot of different qualitative factors that affect whether or not this particular pixel is good for shorebirds or not. So one model that we've been looking at was developed by Nature Conservancy and Point Blue Conservation Science on the Pacific Flyway. So they've been using big data, using eBird records. So this is people just contributing bird records into a massive database that they can sort of figure out what's the optimal timing for different species and where they are on the landscape. So they've got essentially the entire Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley mapped out at the pixel level, know where the areas of most importance are. And they're actually delivering what's essentially an incentive program to landowners to provide shallow water habitat at 2 or 4 or 6 week intervals. And they've got a lot of analytics behind what makes a given wetland unit or a pixel or whatever more valuable than others. So they essentially use all of that data to optimize how they're going to run this incentive program. There are some key differences between the valley there and the wetlands here. That's almost all in rice, flooded for rice in the California area. And historically there was a lot more rice in the Texas coastal plain, but a lot of that's going away as the cities that are in the hill country and upstream are thirstier and thirstier, and there's less water being released downriver. So a lot of that water was being used to create this shallow water wetland habitat, and that's becoming no longer available. So what we want to kind of do, or the idea that I'm kind of pitching here, is to try to get a better sense of whether or not of how we can better manage and plan wetlands and incentivize landowners to make this area the strongest link in the chain for these migrations. If a bird leaves here and it's basically, I mean, you can think about it as like good restaurants versus a fast food dump. If these birds arrive here and they've been eating nothing but Whataburger, nothing against Whataburger, but they're gonna have a hard time making it on a 3-day flight from here to Argentina. If they've been eating really well or eating really healthy, then they're gonna have a better chance of making it. Same goes for when they're heading back up north. The better food they get, the better condition that they leave here in, the stronger fitness they have, the better they're gonna be able to make it to the Arctic on time, find a nesting territory, and do well and propagate the species.
So water is important. Like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is new to me, right? But water is important. And so what in the water would be the good for them, and what is bad?
Yeah, right. Like, so if you just have if this room is a wetland and you put the right amount of water on, birds are probably going to use it, but is it good? So they're mostly fueling their migrations on invertebrates. So there's all kinds of issues that are potentially introduced from use of herbicides and whatever the land use was before the wetland was flooded. But yeah, water quality is a major consideration. If you have the perfect looking wetland and there's no invertebrates in it, then those birds are gonna starve basically. I thought did you raise your hand?
Yeah, my question was more on how you collected the data for this first one time.
So the Gulf Coast joint venture, a lot of the waterfowl management and coordination that goes on in flyways, because it involves multiple states and multiple countries, it's kind of administered through what are called joint ventures. So the Gulf Coast joint venture is the one that stretches in the inland counties of the Gulf from actually from Tamaulipas up into Mississippi or Alabama. So they do these assessments once a year, and I can forward along the methodology that they use. It's very, very well detailed, all the metadata. You can download the exact data that they use and do your own analyses on it.
So it's really available to the public.
that's readily available, but like I said, it's sort of one snapshot. They kind of piece together imagery to make sure they've got enough cloud-free days to cover the whole area. But the reality is, like, when shorebirds need it, which is starting in late July through September, through October, a lot can change, right? So just saying, all right, we're going to just pick the midpoint and say that's our assessment is as good as they can do. But now, of course, with and I don't know, I'm only hearing about this stuff, like with Google Earth Engine and other sources of more frequent satellite passes and better imagery, that that maybe there's a better way to map it out over time.
And those times when they do measure as calibration points, is that what you're thinking?
Sure, I mean that makes sense. Good.
Okay, yeah, we definitely are going to need more detail. The type of data they use and methodology, because as they're going to look at what's available, what's visible within the time frame of this year's time.
Yeah.
To put together something, but it could be, that it's just you start again and you get into a step forward and have one more cohort next year, that could continue with the project. It's just that they have to make sure there are enough data to provide something useful rather than.
Well, can you all use, can you get satellite data through the project, or is that something that?
If it's not free, no,
It's not great.
we don't have those kind of products. That's why we generally rely on what's free, or from the agencies that they can share with us. But we don't have to purchase.
Well, if there's an interest, I mean, there's opportunities to get the funds, I guess, so.
Okay.
Probably be a conversation.
And in the meantime, we're monitoring all of these, a lot of sites across as broad an area as we can. Most of this is between the Corpus area and just west of Houston, the Brazoria County, basically Brazoria, Wharton, and that kind of coastal tier of counties. But we're monitoring the shorebird use on these wetlands as well. So how does the wetland availability change over time? That's going to have consequences differentially for different species. Some of these species passed all by mid-August. They're already through, and they don't change they've evolved these complex migration pathways over eons, and they can't really change it. They can't really say, oh well, wait until I'm just going to overwinter here now. Like they're pretty hardwired about what they're going to do. So if they leave in poor condition, there's consequences. They won't just wait around necessarily. So anyway, a way that the bird data may eventually be able to tie into the wetland availability, you may be able to see that certain species are declining more, and you can tie it to, it's the early season availability of habitat, or that there's a strong link.
So, what are some indicators that are, as you said, it can look good, but there might not be anything. How would you do it?
Right. That's kind of a next step for us, is that we want to start being able to evaluate that. We kind of just initiated a lot of the on-the-ground monitoring project part of it last year. But we have a lot of questions about that. That'll probably start involving capture and tracking of birds, of individual birds. There's a species called lesser yellowbirds that's of real strong interest, that we think we can probably utilize. It's a great kind of an indicator of good wetland. So if we can start capturing birds on different wetlands and assessing fitness as well as tracking birds, we need to know how long they're staying or how long they need to stay to. When you catch birds over a period of time, different birds of the same species should see an increase in fitness, and just measured by mass. It's as they're fueling up to go. So we're kind of, and then of course, we hope that that's an indicator of the quality in terms of what prey is available.
So these byways are coming through here. are they the only flyway for several species? So the entire population should be covered?
So there's probably 30, little over 30 species of shorebirds that you can encounter in this area. And shorebird, I'm really speaking about like sandpipers, plovers, and things like that. I'm not talking about the gulls and all those things. Those are different group of birds. But some of those, yeah, pretty much 100% of the population comes through. Some of them have an elliptical migration. They might go through the northeast US and Canada, Atlantic in the fall, and then go on to South America and come through here just in the spring. Some do the opposite. They'll do, there's all kinds of different things that different species do. But for some of them, some species, buff-breasted sandpiper is a good one that basically those birds are really, really dependent on this area coming and going. They don't overwinter here. They've got to go, they'll go into the grasslands of Argentina and Uruguay from here. They'll fly to Colombia and go down through Bolivia down.
Follow-up, do you estimate population sizes? Those?
Estimating population size is complicated, especially with Arctic migrants because of the vastness of the Arctic. It's not very good. It's difficult to figure that out. And then for migrant populations, we can count all of these. We can count all the birds we count on these wetlands, right? In one given week and then extrapolate to a certain amount. But that's just of the ones that are there that week, right? So they're passing through, and it affects the population size because the populations may be different from one week to the next. You might count 100 birds on this wetland this week and 200 the next week, and that 200 might be a completely new 200 birds. It might be 50 of the ones from last week and 150 new ones. So you got to do a lot more tracking type projects to be able to figure out the passage rates in order to get to a population. So
I was wondering if the funneling through, because you're right, the project would be too large to track population size. So is this a good opportunity if they're all coming through to get census? What is the population size for certain species of bird that's coming through?
yeah, I mean, it would take a heck of an effort to be able to cover a suitable amount of area. And I know this just from the water bird survey, which is those other groups of birds, the terns, skimmers, and pelicans. We count those every year, but that's a pretty massive effort. And they're on a limited number of islands. We know exactly where all of those are. And that's big. That's a big effort. All of these shorebirds are passing through a lot of, it's all pretty much on private lands. The ones that we're focusing on here anyway. We do a lot of other work on ones that are in the saltwater environment. Red knots, piping plovers, we've done tons of work on them. Those are on coastal lands, and those are more amenable to a census, to an actual census, because we know enough now that by this point, by this date, everybody's here, so you can do a one-time census and probably get a pretty good idea of population size. But the passage migrants are just a different challenge.
So we gotta try to match data sets and try to help you as much as you can possibly can. So in terms of the data set, is a time series of satellite imagery and figuring how things change would be helpful between Houston and Corpus Christi, or more a static problem where you match satellite imagery with existing surveys and try to relate them, or both? How do you have ideas of they're going to be looking at what other data sets are easily manageable, etc., and how can those be best used for answer a question?
Yeah, I don't know what would be. I don't know what would be the best approach, and partly it's because I don't know how much and how freely available satellite imagery data is.
That's the first question.
Yeah, that'd be maybe the first thing. But also, I really encourage you. I should say that program in California is called Bird Returns. And it's birdreturns.org. And you can read about you can read just generally about it gives you an idea of the analytics that go into how they structured that program. But we've met with the people who started that, who run that whole program. They're super nice people. They're really, really forthcoming. They would love to see a program like that started. Like if that can spawn another similar type of project somewhere else, they're more than happy to provide, guidance.
But if it would have to be started here before there is a large data set.
Well, so they are monitoring they are monitoring the effects of their program. So they are going out to wetlands that they've incentivized, right? And just to make sure that it's working generally. But the optimization and all the analytics that go into how they run their incentive program, that's based on big data. That's based on eBird data. So that's where are birds in the landscape, the time, and you get the numbers of birds as well as the timing of passage. So all of that stuff can be done really without necessarily, and that can be essentially copied over more or less to this landscape. It's going to be different because the landscape's different, because the species are a little bit different. But essentially that very program could be duplicated.
So you think that the basic data, basic information, we have that combination of satellite imagery and radar, not part of it, and there would be more algorithms or methods to test, but not the raw data is there.
The bird data is there, and then I just don't know about the extent of the aerial imagery data. I don't know what California started with. They may have some other system that was already in place that they've been surveying all those rice lands.
I don't know how we would compare it to California landscape. I just think about your comment about how so many of these birds are primarily on private property. One problem with eBird is you gotta have birds out there access to those properties. Coverage necessarily not really well.
Right. Well, and eBird does. I would encourage you to dive into eBird, and the folks at Cornell who kind of administer that. They do. I mean, that's a widespread widespread problem in any public bird reporting system, but they do accommodate for that somehow.
Yeah, I didn't know there's better access in California.
I don't know if there was better access, or if it's the type of thing that people would really spend a lot of time doing. Right? Like they do. See, what I think they do is that they do adjust if it's all rice land, and they've got a certain amount of eBird checklists and this many species in this whole big area, then they can kind of extrapolate out, right? As opposed to saying, oh, well, it's not very well used because we only have this many birds reported on this many checklist. But the folks with Cornell would be other, all these entities you'd be getting data from. They're pretty forthcoming, helpful about if you've got an issue or a problem, something to solve. They're really great.
Any more questions? They want that information that they need, and we're going to need and send us.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I'll send that the joint ventures methodology.
Yeah.
But basically that they do that, and then they have, so this is how much energy they think shorebirds need. And over the last 20 years that they've done this, the mid-coast region, which is the area we're mainly focused on, has reached maybe 20% of what they think shorebirds need a couple times. Most of the time are not even reaching 20% of what they think the bioenergetic model predicts that that we need to support the shorebird. So it's a big problem.
So one last question from me, this is interesting. Does it have anything to do with, I'm pretty sure, because water being available and having the organisms that they need to feed on, if it's dry and they're not gonna be there, drought impacts that, I'm assuming. It seems like the time period referring to pretty dry.
It is, and a lot of changes are happening on the landscape. So there's a lot less rice, and that's because the droughts in 2011 through 13 or whatever it was. Basically, they cut off, the river authorities cut off all the water rights downstream. We're not releasing any water. So landowners are sitting on rice fields that they've invested a lot of money in, and they can't get water on. So they might put them in corn or sorghum or something like that. So they're no longer going to be habitat.
So
And
land
then
use changes.
As land use changes, land ownership changes in land ownership patterns, the types of people that own and manage these properties. And one of the biggest threats, ironically, to a lot of this landscape is solar farms, which take up hundreds or 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 acres at times. So, and they're targeting a lot of these agricultural lands because they're nice and wide open and they can put a big array. And the money that they're able to offer it's a lot. So landowners, they may have bought this land for conservation purposes to begin with, or they've had it in their family for years, but the economic pressures are really huge too.
Okay, thank you.
But I have Jake up next with a couple ideas, so kind of a transition, another aerial imagery, and then maybe some ARU stuff.
Yeah, so I just with that, just using again aerial imagery, just looking at kind of land use change. I know one of the things we look about, talking about habitats is when it changes, from one habitat to another habitat. It's all habitat, but is it really what you want? So looking at one species kind of in this area specifically, the outwater hurricane, pretty much, only alive because of great intervention by man. A lot of reduced habitat. It's kind of native range around here, and then one of that being brush encroachment. So you look at Goliad Inferior Prairie, not exactly sure how many acres it was at one point in time, but now it's a very much smaller portion of that, and a lot of that is due to brush encroachment. You have it's expensive. It costs a lot of money to maintain your habitat and to maintain specifically grassland. Like if you want to grow brush, it doesn't cost a lot to maintain. But to maintain a grassland and keep the encroaching species out of grassland, that can get expensive. So that is everything from Dave was talking about land ownership changes. Okay, well landowner previous landowner was really like those grassland. Well, next time that land changes hands, this person they want to create something more for like a bite to deer, which is brush. But you start doing that, it's gonna help. You're gonna basically take that highly functioning grassland habitat away. That was my idea.
So is it to try, I think that was to try to use the imagery to identify areas where maybe there's been more change, or even try to
we're trying to,
but just to kind of prioritize, because it's so expensive.
right.
So where's the most change in relationship? Maybe you replace some of this key species habitats as well for prairie chickens.
But then with that, talk about land ownership in Texas, 97% privately owned. You having a cooperative landowner to work with this. That's the first step. And then on the second one, the using ARUs to pick up certain species of concern. Right now black rails is a real bird that not a lot known about. Treading David's territory here, but you're not a lot known about it. Mainly, okay, are they there? Are they not there? What I guess what kind of impacts does even our management of the habitat, what impact is that having? On certain species. That's like one thing interesting, Dave was talking a lot about, rice farming and all that stuff. So there are other things that, I mean, it's right to get insurance on your crop. You have to do certain things by a certain period of time, so you have to have it planted at a certain period of time. And so that might be something you can look into. And also what's available out there on, from the, what are the dates that, the commodity insurance has to be in place on. Because a farmer, I mean, they're going to make sure that they're going to hit those dates. And so, they have to start preparing their land earlier. And so I don't know if that's something that can be looked at.
I think the type of satellite imagery, it's not sad, that's really available. There are a lot of, I don't know if USGS, they, I don't know if it's every 5 years or every year they do a classification, but it has been like the land use, land cover, pretty detailed classification that used to once every 5 years or every year. But they were doing it. Extracted from mindset.
I know the A&M's natural resources to have a lot of things too.
Similar question, basically using satellite documentary to help you better gauge the dynamic changing environment.
Right, yeah, or identifying possibly, or I think identifying, and then maybe it's one of those things like, okay, are certain areas changing more rapidly than others. So maybe, and that that could potentially help land managers and people that have like help U.S. Fish and Wildlife like drive where focus on and really try to find landowners in this area.
And so probably for a team, the first step would be again finding out what is existing out there, USGS or OAM.
Yeah, the soil board, we have say what's called data giveaway. The TAMUCC website. But I think it's USDA. It's USDA's website where it shows inputs they have a lot.
Like the soil layer, like the soil map?
The soil, they have the soils, but they have aerial imagery, they have topography, a lot of information.
And the next one back here. So.
Yeah. Any clarifications? We know for sure we'll reach out as they are compiling the information. They're starting to for possible.
Okay. We had a couple interesting ideas. I mentioned the maritime commerce and dredging. So I guess we don't maybe have as much, I know, like it's good for like in the room maybe to think about data sets that are available. So I don't know if that we necessarily have like as concrete of a research idea as David's project or even James, but do you want to just we talked about some of the things we focus on are where to put dredge material, beneficial use of that. There's a lot of ongoing efforts right now statewide to plan for that. It's not as simple as just like identifying it. You have to then go engineer it and get a permit and all these things. But is there opportunities to, again, maybe it's there's been a lot of shoreline erosion analysis done, but maybe it's there's something there you could do, areas that are more susceptible, where there's potential for that. And then the second one was more of like a safety AI.
Yeah, and these were just questions that popped in my mind that I really don't have the background for, especially the, the maritime, safety. I don't know actually if there's, it was more of a question for you guys, because the whole machine learning AI stuff is a little out of my realm of expertise right now. But I don't know, is there a way to enhance safety in our, in the ports? I don't know if anybody has an interest in that in this group that would want to research that. I don't know what's already done. Using something like that, if that's even what data sets are out there for you guys to look at. I don't really have a lot of info on that one. It was just something I was just thinking in my implementation team, dredging and maritime commerce. What questions can I ask for you guys to see how you guys could potentially help in that arena?
I think that's a really interesting question to look at too. I'm just thinking about the type of information that
know.
needs to go into a model. I think it's
Probably a bigger.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure how information. That's.
I'm not, I think you know more about my question.
The second one, but first one, I can give a general opinion. The second one, so the second one, probably the area that's the most dangerous along the Texas coast when it comes to maritime traffic are the intersections between the ship channel and intercoastal waterways. And there's pretty fast currents swerving. The ships are driven by pilots, very experienced pilots with high technology. The barges, on the other hand, basically are on the phone asking the person in front of them, "Hey, how was it?" And there's really not that much technology there. And so this is primed areas. For AI ML could be, there are more and more current meters along the ship channel. They may not be right at those critical intersections, but they can be closed. And so that's something predicting the currents along the ship channels. That is something that's doable. Ideally, if there was a lot of resources, we'd say it's a mixture between a hydrodynamic model. But there is more and more hydrodynamic model. NGOPS, NOAA has deployed NGOPS 2, Northern Gulf of Mexico forecasting system, the second version. And so there is, it's not stored, there's quite a bit of data. So there's current meter, there's data, and there is the points of danger, which I've advocated for a long time, that a little more technology should be given to the barge operators. I don't know how many accidents there's been, once every couple of years. So if anybody's interested in the second one.
I think I saw Patrick's hand up earlier, but the conversation from last year was about coming from Patrick, the seagrasses and disturbance of seagrasses. I don't know how that would be. With what you're saying just on the channel, but you're not talking about penetrating and how that's changing from the channel out, because that's pretty abrupt change in depth.
Yeah, I'm talking
And that's how that's projecting out. And
I'm talking strictly about avoiding collisions between barges and ships.
right, for safety.
The second one. First one.
The first one is the one that I'm thinking, where is there enough? Because you have to build a model, you have to have enough information to train your model.
Yeah, I don't
And
know what kind of information. I feel like a lot would need to go into it,
Well,
as we've been talking today. I found,
Well, and I don't know, so it is interesting timing though, because the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality just funded Ducks Unlimited on a statewide beneficial dredge material plan. And so they're getting ready, so any opportunity to maybe bring some data and resources to it. Their Anchor QEA is the engineering firm that's working on helping them implement that project. And so the idea is to look at the entire Texas coast and identify those projects. And so I don't know, other than them like doing a stakeholder process and talking to us and saying, where do you think this should go? I don't know how data driven their processes. So maybe there would be an opportunity to provide something if you could find the right data sources, but it's so it's funded by TAMUCC through the Restore Act. I don't remember which, I think it's bucket one.
And then Ducks Unlimited and Anchor QA are kind of the ones that are putting it together, but they're looking for partnerships. And so it might be an interesting timing. That's all kicking off right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to help prioritize the projects that they've already identified through the stakeholder.
Well,
lists.
yeah, that was done before in a different one. And so they're getting
Oh,
a whole
this is
new
the
plan
whole-
together.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
the renaming. I
Yes,
mean, it's
yeah.
a different niche, that's why.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't realize it was completely.
Yeah.
And then the dredge material, I'm assuming now it's the deeper dredge material, right, that we're talking about, not the shallower one.
Well, I mean, there's not necessarily, I mean, yes, all that's kind of spoken for. I don't know, the what's happening now is already got identified locations for as far as the deepening to the 54-foot depth is concerned. I mean, there will be some stuff happening. They're proposing, they're just starting to look at the engineering and feasibility for over like Patrick's area, over Ingleside, along Kingswood Channel. So there's always gonna be new projects, and that's the idea, is that the challenge with beneficial use is that it's very hard to get your project keyed up and ready to go when the dredger is ready. And so how do we do a better job? But now that, it's changing because the Corps has a mandate to use material, a certain amount of material, 75% material beneficially. I mean, it's high. And so they're looking for these opportunities more and more. But, there's other partners that do dredging besides just the Corps, but, there's maintenance dredging that happens all the time. So.
Okay, yes, Patrick.
I took a look at, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
I took a look at the DEIS for the deepening of Harbor Island to 80 feet or 78 feet, I guess it was. And as a geologist, I was looking at the grain size analysis of all the boreholes that they'd made along that route all the way into the bay, and noted that the contractor was mislabeling the sand size. It was actually more clay silt than sand. And I'm wondering how or if anyone is looking at that, and if the turbidity of Corpus Christi Bay, at least over here in Ingleside, we're seeing a consistent high turbidity level because of the beneficial use. Is anybody looking at the grain size and what it's going to do for, I guess, maintenance dredging and the current beneficial use locations?
So, that analysis was, if you're talking about the current deepening of the inner harbor, that was, the grain size analysis was done by the Corps, prior to the project, along with the toxicity analysis. And so that information is available. They're actually pumping it right now into an area, part of property that we own, but some that's GLO land as well, to the south of kind of where the Oasis River comes into the bay. And I mean, it's actually pretty good sediment, right? Sand. Some of our staff went out the other day to actually look at the site where they're doing it now, and it is pretty sandy, stacking pretty well, and does look to be like what it was shown to be in or maybe even more sand than their original grain size analysis showed. So I don't know
That's
about
great. Yeah. If you have anybody there that I could talk to, I'd like to be able to show them what I've looked at for the deepening of the Harbor Island. And I haven't really looked at the Delta core samples, but I'll take your word for it. I would like to discuss some of the samples that are going on at Corpus Christi Bay. And if anybody there would like to, I'd be able to show them some data. Maybe we could discuss that at some point. Thank you.
So Patrick, your concern is the turbidity because of fine sediments being redistributed. Is that?
Yeah, yes, the grain size analysis. I'd have to go look, which is too optimistic. Basically, you're supposed to be able to get so much of a percentage of the 200 sieve analysis, and there was 0 in that analysis that would have allowed it to be a sand rich deposit or rich dredge material. So I'm concerned that the data is not accurate in what that would do if to the bays and to seagrass and to the whole ecosystem, because that doesn't go away right away, and it keeps winnowing and filling the bay with turbidity. What that gets uncovered with every storm or every high wind event and each rain event. And I'm just wondering if bays and estuaries have taken a look at that, or if they would like to. I'd like to go over it with them.
I have not seen the data that you're referring to, Patrick, yet, but we could sit down and go over it.
All right, thank you.
So we had a few more, if we still have time, to go through a couple of the things. So these are, again, a little more less fleshed out ideas necessarily, and again, not sure where the data sets would come from, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We've focused a lot on the last few years on nutrient issues, water quality issues that are driven by high influxes of nutrients. Particularly, we focused on Baffin Bay, and through some of Doreena's work and other faculty from here at A&M Corpus Christi and the Hart Research Institute, we've realized that a lot of that a lot of those nutrients are coming from faulty wastewater systems and septic tanks. And so we're trying to, particularly in the Baffin Bay area, that's a big problem. And we're trying to address this with programs and regionalization of the wastewater infrastructure, as well as replacing septic systems that maybe are either non-existent or failing. And so in Baffin Bay, I feel like we have a pretty good understanding. There's a lot of work being done, but other areas of the coastal bend, I feel like it's much less understood about what those. I have a feeling a lot of the infrastructure here was all built at the same time. So if they're failing in Baffin Bay, they're probably failing in other places as well. And so how do we, if there's anything we could do to try to help prioritize and understand maybe other areas within the coastal bend where this is an issue, but maybe we're not addressing it as well as we originally thought. So I don't know, Dorena, from your experience with some of the water quality stuff, if you have any ideas about data sets, there's all the TCQ SWCM data, and there's a lot of water quality data collected fairly regularly, but it still is maybe not enough to, I don't know if it's enough to get down to like the source tracking like we would need for this, but
that would be missing. That's really more expensive, and it's not done.
There's no other proxy that you could use to try to figure that out.
Not really. Some nature ions can be used, like chloride, bromide, and trace back to sewage, but those I don't think are part of the monitoring. Yeah, but if chlorophyll is available, and if you can pair it with hydroclimatic data, for instance, like if it's stormwater, if it's versus it's like dry weather events, you could kind of see where that's coming up, and you can maybe point it back at the potential source that could be during those times of wet versus dry events. Looking at the information on septic systems, for instance, the databases where they are, because those have to make sense. I don't know how much information is already available on how old they are, what type of septic systems they are.
It's not great.
That would be.
When you get a lot of homemade ones that are definitely not.
So soil types also are pretty important. Properly, if these are functioning properly, you have to have a certain type of soil, right? That is not clay, but not very permeable either.
Yeah.
So no sands, no clays, but maybe something in between. So it's a lot.
Probably look some of citations and things too for the treatment plans. At least, there might be an interesting things to look at, times and spikes, and
that's right.
I mean, might not be that many of those, but that's another database to think about.
Yeah, so, but this is a topic.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine's overseeing a program where we go and we provide, folks with it's free for them to, once they have to apply to be part of the program, but they can replace their septic tank for free. We have funding available to do that, but it's just such a small drop in the bucket. So how do you prioritize the most, right now we're just kind of using proximity to a water body, and some about their
they have to fall within what we classify as through our funding streams, like disadvantaged area. You know, so we're not doing this for people who can afford their own, or should afford their own data replacement system, but you know, we're trying to move into other areas. We have just a small grant to do it in Refugio County now, and just thinking about, just as we do this, you know, I think kind of the general theme for us is always, how do we prioritize our resources? There's just not enough funding to do all these things.
So one way that we had a very simple exercise when I was teaching assistant at the University of Alabama, teaching department of science students in lab, how to identify failing septic systems from area of nature. It was the health of the vegetation. So you kind of saw the lines that were greener, right? And
Well, that's what Travis Christie from the River Authority always says. He's like, you can clearly see who's got a system that's not working when you drive through these communities, you know, it's easy to see with your eyes. So yeah, maybe there is an interesting way for aerial imagery to capture some of that.
it's always healthier vegetation whenever you have the vegetate. So that's a fairly simple
So this, you know,
exercise.
that gets a little interesting because it's people's private property, and we don't want to, we also, and we're very careful about this, we don't want to make people feel, you know, it's not, people are intentionally doing this, you know, so, but, you know, just trying to help us understand, you know, where to focus. Sorry.
Not a question, but thought, yeah, I just see how that vegetation works in the same way. Yeah, I don't think we look at Orville as a possible, so it'd be interesting, like, look at that pairwise to see how does the vegetation serve as a.
Yeah, I mean, just throw it out there. I mean, it definitely is, and maybe it's focusing in areas where we have a little bit less information, like in Baffin, where we kind of know, we just need to do it in a lot of places, you know, there's other counties that we can maybe even code it on. So.
Well, but you know, to your point there, monitoring, there's a lot of monitoring, just don't come up with anything. We just keep on monitoring and keep on saying, well, these are issues, but then we can use the tools to expand, like you said, but in other areas that have been monitored and maybe they are having issues and start seeing them, but it's too late. Yeah, I think it's just coming up with tools to project them. Extrapolate. So that's something to put TCEQ, right? They monitor. NER does not extend down to us, right? Since out the missionaries.
Well, yeah, just in Coconut, right? So things, but
Mrs. River totally right? Do you think Mrs. River still?
well, they're overseeing the Clean Rivers program and some of that sampling that takes place. Yeah, they cover the whole area. So a lot of that TCQ data is being generated by them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, we need to talk about this. Yes.
I know that a lot of graduate students and professors throughout the years have looked at stuff like that, and I also know that the dissertations are public access. It would just really depend on if there's like a barrier to publish before you might use that data, but as far as data sets go, there's a plethora of stuff.
Well, if they collected the data, or they got it from like websites that we talked about, those are free source that you can probably don't have to possible. You don't have to go and try to find somebody's presentation, especially because they're probably really published about their dissertation on this plan.
It's good to do that. A resource like this, or is that?
I know you have to pay to publish it, but I don't know if it's freely available. That's.
I mean, I thought that was the whole point of it, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and but then again, I think they have their projects they work on and they publish the data there. It doesn't necessarily it's not continuous long. Like this.
Yeah, I don't think TCQ is posting their data within their team, but there are, I know a lot of the projects we fund for other people to do will use Gridseed as kind of their data. Data platform for dispersal of the data.
Okay.
the other one I put kind of for water quality, and sorry again for the small text, but is, we're the estuary program and, several of our partners are focusing a lot, in recent years on green infrastructure techniques, nature-based solutions, is another term. So, not our, when it comes to stormwater, not your traditional, big concrete lined ditches. How can we move away from that approach and move to kind of a softer landscape that has a lot of co-benefits for water quality. We've been focusing a lot in particular on this in Baffin Bay. And so we have a number of rain garden projects. So these are pretty small scale projects where you take a drainage area where water would normally run, sometimes adjacent to a parking lot or a lot of the ones that we're doing are on school grounds. And you're trying to concentrate the water into an area and have the proper plants there that could then, while the water's standing there for a while, treat and pull out all those pollutants before the water enters the groundwater or moves on through the landscape. And so they're pretty small scale. I would say we're kind of at the demonstration scale phase, but we get asked a lot, like, well, how do you monitor the benefit of that? So it's kind of just a collective question regarding small scale demonstration projects of like green infrastructure in general. Is there a way to, as we go in the next 2 years and install, 5 of these down in the Baffin Bay watershed, is there any way to monitor the benefit of that? I don't know. But we don't have you get money to do the actual building of the rain garden, but it's often very hard to get the funding needed to do the monitoring of that. These sources aren't, your big restoration grants often. And so they don't require, they want to see monitoring, but they don't necessarily give you the funds to do that, So just another one. I don't have a great idea whether, again, there's existing TCQ.
Yeah, you go back to prior and see if they want to quality improve watershed, especially if those locations were close to where we're installing. Both assuming both surface and subsurface runoff, water quality should improve. Therefore, in creeks, should see improvement.
Yeah, how long that takes though, and then there's so much other things going in the watershed that could impact it. So it's a challenging thing to monitor, benefits of these restoration projects in general, but
and how many of them make to truly make the impact. But it's a good start.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even really see this, but the last one is just kind of this is a big broad idea that I've had, with a few different partners. So I call it kind of like a landscape habitat assessment. So we struggle a lot with, as Jake said, there's all these different kinds of habitats, and one is, some go away and they become other ones. And there's a lot of transitioning that happens. And, there's just this broad mosaic, and it changes as you move along the coast, right? So we, there's a lot of seagrass beds in the Laguna Madre area, right? And there's those kind of decreases as you go up the coast. We're kind of in a very interesting transition zone here with lots of mangrove. We also have the marsh. We also have the seagrass, in our area. And so how do we make decisions about when it comes to, especially things like permitting new projects, how do we prioritize that, both where on the landscape and then also what habitats to make benefits? So, and thinking about it though, not just, from an assessment of just looking at seagrass, and our seagrass coverage changed this much, but how did that change relative to the amount of marsh that we have in that habitat and the amount of oysters that are here? And how do we balance all these things together? And so again, I think it's kind of an aerial imagery type project, looking at things in probably more frequent timeframes than maybe have done in the past, to try and quantify some of this. So you can make up, metrics for all these different types of habitats, and you can have this kind of landscape assessment. This is a hypothetical thing that I've talked about for a while, so I have a little bit more information about it. But, so for like tidal wetlands, you could look at the average size of the tidal wetland units. How did they change in area relative to the chosen year? The tidal wetland are the units in basins that they have a lot of impervious cover, the percentage of open water, low tide, connectivity to a wetland edge that borders wetlands. So you can come up with all these metrics, and you can do the same thing for rookery islands, for seagrass, for oysters, and they all feed into kind of an assessment score for a system. And so the idea is that this would help tell you, okay, say in this area, well, we really are, seagrass is pretty steady, but we're really losing marsh habitat, and we need to focus on that. And the idea is that maybe this would help us with the permitting process, because we struggle a lot right now if we go out and we try to restore a rookery island, we have a small impact to, sometimes less than an acre of seagrass beds, sometimes less than 0.1 acres of seagrass bed. And it's held up in the regulatory process for a long time, even though we're doing it in an area where there's pretty good seagrass coverage, and that impact is probably not going to set the system back greatly, so, but it would be better if we could all kind of buy into an assessment and a tool that we could use to help make those decisions versus just me saying, well, seagrass is great, but anyways, so I didn't explain that very well, and but it's kind of a bigger tool. But I think there's a lot of some of these metrics and some of these things have been established already. USGS did a big project actually to look at the Gulf of Mexico and set metrics for all these different types of habitats. But I will say it was very, there weren't a lot of Texas folks involved, and some of the data sources that they used were not localized here. And so there's an opportunity maybe to kind of refine that approach that USGS did, and maybe build it into a more localized tool for here. So it's a big project though. I don't know, and I think one of the things I think it has the importance is that it has to be a stakeholder driven process, and you have to get the agencies who are making permitting decisions and funding decisions and things like that involved in the process, because otherwise, if they don't have any buy into the tool, why would they, potentially use it, things like that. So anyways. That's my last one. That's it. Yeah.
For kind of detailing what's what the satellite image resolution is pretty small. Would be very difficult. But if you had the funding, for example, to get an army of drones to do mapping whenever conditions are right and to look at the condition of the time, would be something you could do.
I like the term army of drones. It sounds very intense. Sounds like something that would raise a red flag somewhere if I asked for money for an army of drones. But no, I'm teasing. No, I mean, we're exploring that a lot. We've had a lot more of our partners that we partner with on our monitoring projects are using drones more and more. I mean, I would say some of our staff are training on them and trying to use them more for the bird monitoring projects, that some of those that David talked about. We haven't invested a ton in buying kind of our own for those types of purposes. But I mean, I think you all probably know more about it than I do about it. Maybe that's the way it's shifting away from the publicly accessible aerial imagery that doesn't always meet the needs to more of this, hey, there's these tools out here that are pretty affordable now and get you the imagery you need. I mean, we're working with Dale Pollock over at the Heart Research Institute. He used drones to do a really cool project looking at the Rookery Islands and, crazy level of detail. I don't know, what's the size of the resolution that they're looking at? They can count eggs in a nest, and so yeah, we have tiny eggs that, and the idea was because we don't ever know, we didn't really have a good idea. We count the birds sitting on the nest, but we never know whether the eggs actually hatch. So they have to go out real frequently, like you're talking about, when the conditions are right and all that. So I definitely think it's there. Do I have a bunch of money to buy an army of drones right now? I mean, don't know that, but
I think I remember last year, Patrick Seagrass project for our other homework, and it was an invitation, but I don't know, available for them to work with. So I don't know how.
Yeah,
they
that,
into this as well.
I thought I'm trying to work with Ken Dutton. He has found some interesting new approaches that use more of these kind of readily accessible satellite imagery to try to map and a different approach for using AI to do it. We're trying to get it funded right now, but we don't have any funding for it right now. But
well, if you want to explore that.
okay, well, I'll ask him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unrelated necessarily to the project that I was specifically talking about, but just another application of AI and machine learning that's going on with the bird world is basically ARU, or autonomous recording unit. These are just devices that are set out in whatever habitat you want, and they're basically just listening, recording. Of course, it can take forever to go through and picking out sound and everything, but they're using machine learning to be able to identify and quantify the number of birds in this case, wetlands. I mean, some of the wetlands that they're similar to ones in Vermont.
Have you talked about him? That community does the same thing. But with frogs.
Oh, really? Realize it's-
Yeah, he came in one of our implementation team meetings, I was talking about terrapins, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all-
That's it. That was my last slide.
So much.
You asked for bios for everybody too, so I put that in the presentation and I can share that. Or maybe I didn't add it, but or maybe I didn't add it. Anyways, I have a separate PDF if y'all want that later.
Yes, yes.
Of our staff. I just put everybody, so.
Yes, because when they're gonna.
There's a lot of different topics covered by different staff people, so, yeah.
Yes, they can reach out to, yes.
One question, that's splendid goal for the habitat. It's too big for deer, and I think the coordination with state agencies also is not gonna work for them. But if there's parts of it, like, are there data sets particular to Texas or pieces that they possibly could help you with?
Maybe I'd have to look on this. The seagrass one would maybe be the most interesting if there was an opportunity to do kind of Ken's approach of but the problem was, I think it was you had to buy, so part of the grant was to buy the imagery that was kind of needed in order to do this, but I could look and see how much that was, but there's that component, because that one's also heavily linked with his other monitor that he does, what they call it tier 2 sampling, which is so much more detailed. And so you have actual, on the ground percent covers, and they're doing, isotope analysis and all that. So he does a lot of analysis on that already, but linking that with the tier 1, that's what's been missing for so long, and the imagery is just so out that we're using. 2006 the last really good data set. It's interesting though, it goes back to another one of these where you gotta Parks and Wildlife is technically responsible for that, so it gets a little wishy-washy when you gotta figure out, how do you gotta get their buy-in, and they gotta be okay with the approach, forward. But so it was kind of our idea was to try to do kind of a pilot project to show that it can work in the coastal bend area, this type of approach, this more satellite AI approach could work for here, and then build it out to the whole Texas space.
Something that would be a match. One of the teams last year already worked.
So what was the seagrass project from last year? What did they look at?
I
Or
think
they couldn't do it because
they did something, they weren't very happy with what they got because of the data, but they were looking at the disturbance, I think, from the traffic.
Yeah.
On the sequence.
Okay.
So.
It was something interesting. They set up an AI model, and I thought the most interesting part is that the AI model, it's not probably enough data, and there's one particular place where the model was failing, and I thought that was interesting, but that was right next to a road in Mission, Arkansas, and that was clearly a place where folks came exposed some potential with anthropogenic.
And that was not part of the model.
Yeah, but spectacular model failure is something interesting. So they really highlighted a very specific geography of their study area.
Well, there was a
Good
finding,
job. They did a
right?
good job.
But the data were limited in terms of the temporal resolution of the seagrass and water quality. That was not sufficient, because also AI models, if you have just a few events, that's just not gonna do it. It could be an AI model because you don't have enough to train on, so.
That's something that would be helpful to the teams, is collaboration on the data and regular
Yes.
contact. Some of them should do.
Yes, but we will be in touch.
Anybody interested?
Yes.
Any
But
takers?
they are assessing, we have our.
That's a lot to throw
Yes,
people.
speakers. Yes.
Say, give me a project at the end of 2 hours, but so we understand.
They're taking notes. I think they started a shared file where they add and what they've learned and what they're picking their interest. But we have 4 more, I think, of this, and they're just listening and trying to make those connections between themselves too, because they're gonna be probably 3 groups working on 3 different projects, so.
That was my question. is, you know,
Yes,
what's-
yeah, not everybody working on one project, so. And 2, looking at what they're doing, what their research is, that they might have knowledge already on to apply to this, or, you know, that whatever they could do for this project they're choosing can help them with their own research. Ideally, that's how they're focusing. Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Oh, can I copy the presentation, or you will send it to Audrey?
Why don't I send it to you? Let me add the bias to it and then I'll send it.